God have mercy on your soul, because the waiver wire is dank this week. The dank of the danks as we roll deeper into the fantasy playoffs. Week 16 not looking hot on the waiver wire, but that's probably why you need this video the most. We're going over 22 players you can grab off waivers right now to hopefully help you this week, next week, or somewhere in the playoffs. We got 2 weeks left, maybe 3 if you're in a weird league. But what you need to do right now before we do any of this is click that subscribe button, tap it with the finger on your phone, click it on the mouse with your computer, because we're going hot and heavy on the waiver wire every day. Also, I'm going to help you set your lineups. But the main reason why you need to click that button is I'm going to be a key resource to your research next offseason as you're getting ready for your drafts, because we're covering these players every day. We're covering the advanced metrics, their player values, where they should be going in drafts. We do a ton of drafts, going over how they're falling in drafts, how they're rising, and everything else. If you miss these videos during those times, you're not going to get that information to help you strategize for your drafts. Click that button. Therefore, you're good to go when these videos come up for you for draft season. Or if you want to study more up on the NFL draft, I'm going to be here too. But let's look at these 22 players, and we're going to start off with a quarterback here, Derek Carr. And the quarterback position off the waiver wire is very fascinating, because on the macro level, it could be anybody from Matthew Stafford to some guy that just got dropped. Ideally, you should be rostering just one quarterback right now. You shouldn't have a backup. Your backup should be a jabroni quarterback off the waiver wire, considering it's a onesie position. And if you need to backfill, the odds are you can just play the matchups with the quarterbacks from there on going forward. And right now, we got 2 weeks left of the season, so you should be set for the rest of the year at quarterback, unless you got 2 studs. However, if it's super flex, probably don't have quarterbacks on the waiver wire. Derek Carr here, week 17, we got Tampa Bay. And you throw the ball against Tampa Bay, you throw the air yards, you throw it deep. We saw it with Green Bay last week. We saw Drake London score a lot of fantasy points against Tampa Bay. On the season, he's averaging 250 air yards per game, and that's going to increase against Tampa Bay. That being said, this week, you may want to slow it down against the Rams. The game script might push him a little bit, but we shall see going forward. However, that week 17 meeting I'm very interested in, and I'm cool with stashing him a week or playing him this week if you really need to. It really depends on where you're at. But week 17, I got my eye there, and I'm cool for rostering a player a week early if I feel like I'm going to need him that week. Hopefully you don't. Hopefully you're stacked at quarterback. A lot of you guys are. But still, looking forward now, because these matchups really matter as we get deeper into the playoffs. Hunter Henry, he's starting to fire a little bit. 19 fantasy points 2 weeks in a row. Last 2 games, 6 targets a game, 21.1% target share. We got Denver. You can throw it on them a little bit. Then after that, we got Buffalo, which could be an impactful game script that could allow him to hit. However, he's a tight end. Tight ends do this. Even the good ones. They just do up a little bit more. However, Hunter Henry, am I trusting him? No. Am I trusting any tight end I'm picking up off waivers? No. Is there a Trey McBride left on waivers? No. If you're looking at tight end off the waiver wire, you're just praying to the gods at this point. Even if he's getting a 21% target share in his last 2 games, you're hoping he hits again. He might against Denver. He might. But again, you're getting a tight end off waivers. Exercise with caution. Ty Chandler's hot. He's rostering just 46% of leagues. Look for that to shoot up to around 60 to 70%. As long as Alexander Madison's out, he's going to get the touches. He's very explosive. Any touch, he can house it. We know that. So a 96.4% opportunity share. The touches are going to remain for the rest of the season. Noah Brown's going to be getting touches, targets, snaps, routes, because Nico Collins is hurt. Tank Dell's on the IR. Week 15, he blew up for 22 fantasy points after an injury, and then a ramp-up period after the injury. We're starting to get right here. Saw 11 targets in that contest with a 32.4% target share. So the targets are ramping up. CJ Stroud should be back sooner than later. We do have the Browns this week. That's a little bit scary. Also, you want to know Xavier Hutchinson starting to light it up on the spreadsheet. Not crazy, but last week he saw an 89.7% route participation rate. The targets increased the week prior. Pay attention to him. Don't pick him up unless you're like in a 16-teamer and need some help. But again, pay attention. Jake Browning, we need to pay attention to him. Jamar Chase, we got issues there. However, on the season, he's operating out an 83.5% clean pocket when he's throwing the ball. However, just 157 air yards per game. But the thing to notice is his numbers has jumped over his last 3 games. We got Pittsburgh coming up. We know those game scripts can be nasty one way or the other. So he is a gamble, but could be a gamble in the right direction. He's throwing the ball. He's looking good. We're looking at waiver wire quarterbacks. I started off with a preamble on waiver wire quarterbacks. Remember that while we're looking at these quarterbacks off the waiver wire, we're not trusting them. But again, he's going to be good enough to get you QB2 results, and you're hoping for QB1 numbers. It's going to be harder if Jamar Chase is out. That being said, pay attention to Jake Browning. This matchup could help you. However, if it's a 12-team league, you probably already got a quarterback. Clyde EdwardsAir, last 2 games. 15 touches per game, 66.7% opportunity share, 4 targets a game, 10.8% target share, and ran 34 routes per game in those contests. If Pacheco's out, he's getting good starter snaps, touches, targets, and opportunities here where you could start him and he's okay. He was good last week with 20 fantasy points, week prior 8. He's probably going to be up and down like that. He probably is. He's going to be hard to predict. He's going to be volatile. You do not trust this coaching staff when it comes to the workload with these running backs. Plus, you got 2 of them, and they're going to siphon each other up a little bit. But when you're paying attention to Clyde EdwardsAir, you know you're going to be getting workload out of him. Tyler Boyd. Jamar Chase has an injury. Routes, targets, snaps, everything's going to boost for Tyler Boyd. On average, when Higgins or Chase is out of the lineup, he averages about 13 fantasy points per game. However, it's volatile. Those 13 fantasy points per game, they're also coming from spike weeks where in some of those games he's scoring 20-plus fantasy points, and people remember those, but they're not remembering the games where he's also scoring 5, 8, 3 fantasy points, and you're left scratching your head. So remember that. We're getting a volatile option here that has some highs, but the lows are lows. You play that how you want to play that, homie. Now we're looking at Gardner Minshew. In his last 3 games, he had 36.3 pass attempts per game, 253 air yards a game, and a 7 ADOT. He's just slinging it more. He's consistent. He's safe. We have Atlanta. That's going to be a weird game script. Could be high pace, could be slower pace. That's up to Arthur Smith because he's just a weird dude in general. Then we got the Raiders week 17. That one is going to be a fun matchup. You can just tell. That Colts and Raiders, that's going to be a fun game with multiple fantasy contributors. I like him for week 17. I'm iffy in week 16, but I'm iffy on every quarterback that comes off the waiver wire in general. Jarrett McKinnon last 2 games. 14 touches per game, almost a 30% opportunity share. Pretty good as a 1B running back. 3 targets a game, 32 routes a game. So they're using him in the passing game. He's running a lot of routes. That's a good rate there. 32 routes a game in his last 2 games, and he's scoring fantasy points because his usage in the passing game and scoring some touchdowns is allowing him to elevate his fantasy floor here. 12 fantasy points in week 14, 18 in week 15. We got the Raiders coming up. Both these running backs could do something, probably enough to get you by. So Jarrett McKinnon's good to have on your roster. Rashid Shahid, deep ball city. You're not going to trust him. He's one of those players that's up, down, maybe up here and there. He probably hits about 1 out of every 5 games or so, 1 out of 6. But when he hits grand. And those grand games win your matchup. That being said, we got Tampa Bay week 17. You may want to have him stashed for that because people are going to pick him up playing deep ball city with that. If they're hurting, you don't really want that to happen in your championship game. But you may want to play defense with him because you do not want him to go off in that contest because Tampa Bay allows a lot of deep balls. And a lot of teams like to sling deep balls on him. But again, 13.8% target share, 14.9 ADOT. If you're hurting at wide receiver and you want to go YOLO, this is your YOLO wide receiver where you close your eyes and you just hope he brings in a deep catch because he's that type of wide receiver. Plus, we're getting a ramp up off an injury. So when he starts hitting, it's just going to come out of nowhere because he's at the end of that ramp up right now. 14.9 ADOT, 13.8% target share. You never know what you're going to get. He's a box of chocolates, and that's the bottom line because those deep balls says so. And Zamir White, week 15, got it done. 17.5 PPR fantasy points, 65% opportunity share, 20 touches. Josh Jacobs out, Zamir White in. Josh Jacobs in, Zamir White out. And that's due to the touches. He does have an upside with the size adjusted athleticism. He saw 4 targets. We didn't expect him to get that much because he barely got that much at Georgia during his whole career there. But still, that upside due to the size adjusted athleticism, if he sees green in front of him and it has an open running lane, he's lights out. He could do that. And they're going to use him between the tackles and around the goal line. He's going to get a lot of touches if Josh Jacobs is out. Pay attention to Josh Jacobs. But Curtis Samuel is another volatile wide receiver who's getting consistent here at the tail end of the season. Week 12, 19 fantasy points against Dallas. Week 13, 10.5 against Miami. Then we got a bye. Week 15 last week, 21 against the Rams. 6 targets a game, 16.3% target share. Volatile wide receiver with a ton of upside. A good YOLO wide receiver. If you're hurting, if he's on waivers and you want to go YOLO, Curtis Samuel might be a guy to look at. And Trey Surman is a guy you need to pay attention to because Zach Moss has that injury. He might be getting touches. Looks like they like Trey Sermon a little bit. He was averaging 5.18 yards per carry in this contest against the Steelers. 17 touches is a good clip for a running back. And when you're picking him up, you're picking him up for touches. And that's it. And you're just hoping for the best. You're hoping that workload transitions to some production to get you over the hump. More than likely, 17 to 20 touches scores you enough to get the job done. 10, 11, 12. He ran bad with 8 with 17. But more often than not, you're probably around 10 points or so. But 8's not too far off. Again, he's just for the touches. Jamison Williams, snaps and targets are up. Dan Campbell said so going into the week, and that's what happened. Look for him to get experimented more throughout the rest of the season. Good matchup for him coming up against the Minnesota Vikings. They're very susceptible to the deep ball. Look for them to go deep ball city with him here soon. If he brings it in, that's good. If he doesn't, that's bad. That being said, Chase Brown is lightning in a bottle, and we just got to grab that bottle. Last 3 weeks, 30.6% opportunity share, 10 touches a game, 11.2 fantasy points per game. But that's buoyed from week 14 where he scored 19.6 PPR fantasy points, averaging 4.3 routes per game, 14 snaps per game. The workload's not enough to get it done, but he's so electric. All it takes is one touch. Something happens to Mixon. Even if Mixon is out for like 3 series, that's enough for Chase Brown to do something. Probably a good stash. I don't know if you're in a good position to stash players right now. We got 2 games left. If you have Mixon, I'm highly interested. That's for sure. If you're hurting at running back and you just need to pick up a couple, I'm highly interested. Pick up a safer running back who you know is getting touches, and then Chase Brown as your upside flyer and see what happens these next few weeks. But Chase Brown's got that upside, got that gusto in his game. Joshua Palmer's back from injury. Kind of snuck up on us a little bit. 4 targets and 12.5% target share, 14.5 ADOT. And he's getting those air yards here. The thing is, can you trust Chargers wide receivers or any Chargers right now? Things are going to hell right now with the Chargers, but he is going to run a lot of routes. He's going to get some targets each week, and maybe that's all you need, and maybe that's all you can get right now. Roshan Johnson, week 15, 6 targets last week. Can you trust the Bears? I know he had a 40.7% opportunity share, but between Khalil Herbert and Donta Foreman, they had about 50% opportunity share between them. I'm seeing the pie here split between these 3 running backs. They're all getting opportunities. However, we got Arizona this week. They give up fantasy points in bunches to running backs. We got these 3 Bears running backs going up against Arizona. It's going to be Russian roulette here. Someone's going to get kicked in the nuts. Which running back is going to give your balls the boot? Dontavian Wicks here, week 15. 7 targets, 19.4% target share. He's got a ton of upside, especially in this offense. Love spreads it around. We do have a weird matchup here against Carolina because they're just in weird game scripts in general. They slow it down, and the Packers will run a slow game script as well. That being said, though, Wicks could get it done. Wicks has the opportunity to get it on any given Sunday. Look at these last, I'll say, 5 games here. Week 10, 4 targets. Week 11, 5 targets. Week 13, 4. Week 14, 6. Week 15, 7. So anywhere between 4 and 7 targets is what we're looking at here. So opportunities are in bunches. So that being said, he might bring something home. We're not trusting anybody off the waiver wire, and we're just playing gambles here. He has a weird matchup that could be advantageous or slow on him. That being said, another gamble wide receiver, Tyjae Spears, the ultimate handcuff. getting a lot of touches for a handcuff, getting a lot of snaps for a handcuff. He's a lottery ticket and a stash and a handcuff. However you want to value that, you may want to pick him up because they may want to see what they have in Tyjae Spears here in the back end of the season. Demario Douglas, prior to his injury, he was seeing over 20% target share, seeing a lot of opportunities with a low ADOT. So he was scoring just enough to get you by. It wasn't really hitting it home, but he's been hitting ever since Kendrick Bourne has been out with that injury. Now we're in that ramp-up period after his injury, but we might get right against the Broncos this week. We don't know for sure. Saw 5 targets last week, so he is getting opportunities and targets and workload. That being said, that's something that you can hang your hat on if you need a wide receiver that you know that's going to get some targets going their way. Zay Jones is interesting on spreadsheets at least, maybe not on the football field, but a 41.7 routes per game and 83.3% route participation rate in his last 3 games. 10 targets a game, 23.1% target share, a 17.6 ADOT, average depth of target. So he's getting deep balls, he's getting targets, he's owning a large share, he's running a lot of routes. It's not really hitting in fantasy production. We have Tampa Bay this week, though. So if we're holding true to these metrics and we're playing against Tampa Bay, which is a pass funnel defense, Zay Jones is lighting it up this week. He's lighting it up. He's got good odds here to be a good guy to pluck off waivers and pray to the gods with because he's getting enough targets. Those targets are deeper. He's running a lot of routes. There should be a lot of opportunities. Wide receivers are scoring points on Tampa Bay. Wick scored points on him. Jaden Reed scored points on him. Drake London scored points on him. Every wide receiver is scoring fantasy points against Tampa Bay. I'm scoring fantasy points against Tampa Bay. That being said, Zay Jones, if you're ever going to play him, you might as well play him this week. If not, just dump him to the waiver wire if you have him rostered because you're never going to start him again for the rest of the season. Those are 22 players that we're looking at to get off waivers this week. A lot of players to look at. Not the greatest waiver wire, not the greatest action, but we got to do what we got to do. Hopefully this video helped you out. Hopefully you found a guy to pick up. Let me know who you're picking up in the comments below. I want to hear about it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on the way out. I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.